Welcome back to a well-lived life with Dr. Penn. Today we have a wonderful special guest. She's such a powerhouse, an author, a mentor, an advisor. She is a counselor, and she is an influential speaker in her community and around the world. Montrella Cohen is our special guest for the day. I'm really excited because when we met, we kind of had the same purpose with finding a mentor. We found that, and then in that we found each other. So the work that she does is very important. As we know, after COVID happened, there was a lot of mental uh, degrading, degrade, degrade that was happening, and people were starting to get depressed, both introverts and extroverts, and people who were falling out of their relationships and having problems just being within the limit, the confined limits. So mental health became a really big issue. And so we're here to hear what she has to say about her book being published in Essence magazine. That must have been fabulous. And so just tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are, what you do, and how you came about becoming so wonderful.
Well, Dr. Penn, first of all, thank you for having me. And thank you to your audience for taking time out to listen. I think we all kind of are aware about how important mental health is. And I like to say the key word is health, because there's still a lot of stigma as it relates to mental health and seeking support, right? A lot of cultures like mine says, you don't tell people your business, you keep it to yourself. And so because of that, we've had generational traumas and things actually passed on, as well as poor coping mechanisms. So of course, when this COVID hit the land of the free, I mean, this is the USA, this is the land of the free. We used to come in and go as we please. When it hit us, and then it stayed the first quarter, and then it stayed the second quarter. And here we are 2 years later, and we're still dealing with it. There are a number of issues. Teenage suicide is on the rise, as the Washington Times just reported last week. We also have more depression, more anxiety. People are walking off jobs, without a plan. So many things are happening. And even couples are stuck in the house together. Now, it's worked for some and destroyed others. We didn't realize how much careers played a role in our relationships. That time apart can really serve us some good. So that's what I'm all about. I'm committed to crushing the barriers to mental health so that we can really allow people to be who they are, fully self-expressed, and to step into their greatness.
What are some barriers that are affiliated or associated with mental health?
Well, like as I mentioned, one of them is just cultural stigma or stigma in our society. And I know, with social media, mental health is not necessarily trending, but you do have some celebrities who have come out and spoke about their mental health. Lady Gaga, Taraji P. Henson. Unfortunately, we've had many tragedies, like Robin Williams, the comedian that made us all laugh, decided, to commit suicide, and so many more, just so many more. And so some of the barriers is just, not really knowing how to seek help, because you're not accustomed to doing that. That wasn't the way to cope. We cope with prescription drugs. We cope with alcohol. We cope with keeping it to ourselves and just being strong, unfortunately. So that's one of the barriers, is just not knowing where. Another thing I see a lot in my practice while I'm working with clients is that for some reason, people think it's kind of like you go to school, you get this training, Dr. Penn, like I can't just go crack somebody back or whatever you do. Probably cause more damage than good, right? If I tried, I'm not trained as a chiropractor. A lot of people try to wear the therapist's hat. It's very interesting to say the least. And people, they're just like, oh, I hear oftentimes, especially women, they're telling their partners things like, well, why don't we process this? And they're trying to have a therapy session at home. I do not recommend that at all.
I do not recommend diagnose yourself, right?
Or your
Stop doing that.
partner, or your
Yes, yes,
children,
yes.
there's a lot of that going around. He's a narcissist. I'm like, and she's a narcissist. And it's like, well, have they been actually diagnosed with that? That is a mental health diagnosis. So those are two of the barriers that I see. Yeah, some people are just like not really understanding how serious it's health. It's health. It's part of your health, your mental. And what happens is when we do have diabetes and high cholesterol and all these other, ailments, medical ailments, it's typically a manifestation of everything we've been just holding inside mentally. It got to come out some kind of way.
What are some warning signs a loved one could begin to recognize? Sometimes we're like, oh, that person's depressed, or oh, that
Mhm.
person is suicidal, or that person is bipolar, and they don't have a degree in that, so they don't
Right,
really know. So
right.
what could be some signs that a viewer could be recognizing about a loved one that they have?
Well, I would actually challenge the audience to check out themselves, because again, if we start to try to diagnose friends and family around us, like even for a narcissist, oh, he's a narcissist. Well, what are you doing with him? Like, it just says, it speaks volumes. So seriously, with COVID, it's a trigger. Now, Dr. Penn, I'm not even sure if you're aware of this, but in 2018, I became a member of a parent's worst nightmare. And that is, I lost my daughter at the age of 25. She was 25 to lupus. She had only been diagnosed with lupus just 11 months earlier.
Wow.
I was not even familiar with lupus. Obviously, when it hits you directly, that's when you start to learn. And I didn't realize how much it impacts Black women in particular. And on top of that, she had a daughter. So my grandbaby was only 5 years old at that time, and she lived only 11 months. Why am I bringing this up? My daughter, as brilliant as she was so talented and gifted. She had even purchased a home in Washington, D.C., which, if you know the housing market in Washington,
Okay.
is quite the feat. She was a mom, she was a hard worker, but she was stressed. And the people that she was around, and I'm sure you see this even in your practice, Dr. Penn, the environment is everything. But with COVID, it triggers such grief and loss. So all of us, I would say all of us are at some stage of the grieving process when it comes to COVID, whether that's, not being able to come and go as we please, having to wear a mask, like all these different things, like it's rocked our world. But what happens is when you've had a loss like mine, or maybe not even that extreme, but you've had any kind of loss or grief before COVID, COVID's a trigger now. So I would say, look in the mirror. I love that song by Michael Jackson. I'm starting with the man in the mirror, right?
Yes.
And that was the universal, that was meant to be for women too,
Yes.
humankind. But identify if you're still grieving. Identify if you're stressed. Because what happens is I'll say, how are you? And our natural response is fine. When there's so much going on inside. So if you've had a loss, and also with grief and the stages of them, and I'd love to go through the 5 stages by Kubler-Ross. But if you've had a loss, it's not necessarily death. It could be maybe you relocated, maybe you got promoted. So even some of the good changes, grief comes with change. They say the only thing constant is change. Well, we grieve when we have to go through those changes, whether they're good or bad.
That's a good word. I think that in life we have gotten accustomed to just get over it. It's a part of life, and we harbor that. And as you know, I'm a physician as well. Um, and yes, especially since COVID, people have come in and they're like, my back hurts, I have these headaches, and it's like, what's your stress doing? I was
Mhm.
telling people like yourself, I mean, like you're telling people, stress is a pre-existing factor. Like people, a lot of people passed away and people were like, they were healthy. I was like, were they? Like, do you know the
Right.
insides or the outsides of their stress level? Because
So true.
stress really affects your immune system. So
You'd be stressed to death.
that's very good.
Yes.
So I want
Yeah.
to ask you about, is there a science to being happy?
Absolutely. I love that you brought this up. We actually are in the process of launching a 5-day Live Your Happy challenge. That is on
Oh,
February the 8th. And I'd love to share that link with you and your audience. And it's free. And we're going to have some phenomenal speakers. And we're looking at happy holistically. But there is a science to it. And believe it or not, you know how they say, knowledge is power. I would say there's some insider secrets to living happy. And so that's what we want to share in the challenge. But one of them is from a mental health standpoint. A lot of times my clients come into the office, whether it be through a breakup or some, arrogant or rude supervisor that they're dealing with, or some financial stress, or whatever the case might be, maybe depression because of a divorce or something that they've been carrying around for a while, or even grief and loss. And they'll say, Montrella, how can I get through this? And they literally are asking, and you might get this too, Dr. Penn, coming through your office, where they want you to kind of snap your fingers and like make it go away. Well, the thing about emotions and happiness is we can't run from them. We have to embrace the emotions.
yes.
And that's like a whole different way of thinking. We're not used to confronting. And we have some people who just totally avoid confrontation, anger, but even being angry, as long as we, learn to channel it in a positive way. I'm not saying go out here and, do harm and, be illegal or anything like that, but it's okay to be angry.
This is so delicious to me. I cannot begin to tell you how excited that I am that you're even sharing this information. Is so important because people want to tuck away and put away. And and as a chiropractor, I'm always telling my patients, I said, first of all, I'm a healer. I don't just crack people's backs, and whatever there's stuff that comes to the top, right?
Yes.
And you're addressing some of those things.
Yes.
I have a favorite book that I recommend to people, but I'd love to hear what kind of, and I know you have your own book as well. Tell us a little bit about the books that you would recommend, or a book or author that you recommend, but then follow that with, tell us about your book.
Okay, sure. So what was your book though? I heard you say you had a book that you recommend.
What is it? the one book that I always recommend to people's Mirror Works by Louise Hayes.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Hayes, yes.
And I tell people, I'm not a therapist, but I will tell you that when you look at yourself in the mirror, like The Man in the Mirror by Michael Jackson, that you will see things about yourself that you were thinking when you were 17 and now you're 72. That stuff didn't matter, but you harbored it for so long. You fed on it, you ate on it, you thought on it, you meditated, you made it a part of your life.
Yeah.
And now you can't figure out why you can't sleep.
Yeah. and they come to me with that. I'm like, so what were your thoughts?
Yes.
To sleep. They're not even aware. Like it's just part of the programming for years. So absolutely. I love Louise Hayes. I love how she really dissects the entire body. And she'll look at the cause and she'll give you the affirmation for it. And because that's all about getting present. A lot of times we are ignoring, our body is talking to us. We're ignoring the signs. We're allergic to some folk.
Oh yeah, like you make me sick. They sure do, girl.
Literally. And we continue to be around and continue to try to forge something that is just very toxic. So I love reading. Oh my goodness, I love reading.
Me too.
My book specifically, it talks a lot about mental health, because one of the things I think my clients appreciate about me is that obviously I've overcome a lot with losing my daughter, but not only that, I was actually raped by my daughter's father at 14 and had her when I was 15. And if any of you out there are teenage parents, you know, or were teenage parent, you know how scary. I mean, it was just scary. I remember trying to like figure out how is the baby coming out?
Yeah,
Like it
wow.
was so terrifying and traumatizing. And like I said, culturally, I found out years later that the doctors told my stepmom I was traumatized. They never put me in counseling, and I just was, I had to deal with that on my own. It wasn't until I went to volunteer at a rape crisis center here in Washington, D.C., that I got my own healing through the training to be a volunteer to help others, survivors. I
Yeah,
got my healing. So
yeah.
I encourage you all. I know we passed November and all of that. Please be of service. Use your talents and gifts to give back. You never know what miracles are waiting for you there. So my purse takes you through, starting with my daughter China, her birth, and all what I went through. It's a teaching memoir. And my approach and my practice is practical. I like to give practical, actionable tools that my clients can use, just like an umbrella for the rain.
Yeah.
And so the book is called The Purse because, first of all, us ladies never leave home without it, right? And I take contents of a woman's purse to bring home different points about how to create and maintain healthy relationships. So I spilled the tea. It's not my autobiography because that would be 10 more books, but I spilled the tea on some of the most critical relationships in my life and how I overcame a lot of adversities in my book. Yeah.
That is so good. There's a book by John Lee called Grow Yourself Up.
Mhm.
And I recently read it, but I was so impacted by it because we take our mannerisms at different points in time in our life into our everyday practice, as you would say.
Yes.
And then we're like, who is this person? We're like yelling at people, screaming at them, hitting on them. And we're like, we don't know why we're like that. It's like
Yeah.
something happened, get to it.
Yes.
There's
Yes.
some depth there that you need to
Yes,
look
I have
at.
to check that out. I haven't read that one. Another one that I would recommend, since you asked, is Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. Powerful. He was a plastic surgeon, and the book is all about your self-image because, ladies and gentlemen, we can never outperform our own self-image. So if you're stuck at a $50,000 a year job, if you have the image that that's what you deserve, even if some other amazing opportunity comes, dropping into your lap, you'll sabotage it. We can never outperform our own self-image. So I had to reinvent myself. I had to reinvent myself and stop believing that I was this victim, right? At 14, I had to evolve out of that. And for you parents out there, and I know you're a parent, Dr. Penn, children make you grow. We
Don't
think
they?
we're the parents and we're here to teach them. They're here to teach us so much.
Oh,
As
yes,
a parent
darling.
of a twin, I had to like now give a darn about myself because I had someone else to care for. But I had to reinvent myself and recreate myself and no longer believe. I had to abandon the victim mentality to be where I am, to have the success that I have, and to help the hundreds of clients that I have. I'm very thankful for my mission, which is to be the example so that others are inspired to step into their greatness.
And I'm so inspired by you. Every time I see you, you were on a billboard in Atlanta, weren't
Yes.
you? And
Yeah.
I just, when I look at you, I think, look at that stunning, beautiful woman.
Let's
She
see.
is so gorgeous and well put together, well versed.
Let's
And
see.
that alone speaks volumes, right? When you feel good, when you look good, you feel good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
I wanted to ask you about what common thread in your life got you to where you are now.
What do you mean by common thread?
So something that happened, I mean, of course, when you were 14, you had that very life-changing incident, well, 13 actually,
14.
right?
14. Had her at 14.
And then was there something before then you wanted to be, or something that you were interested in? For me, it was I was always interested in science, the ticking of things and how it worked. And I was like, I want to see how this, what this does and how this works. And
Mm.
what would happen if and so when you were younger, did you have something like that was like, I'm very interested in people. I just want to sit and listen to them or something like, did you have
Oh,
experience?
I see. So actually, there are different types of therapists. As you know, we got the counselors, licensed professional counselors, we have psychologists, and then there are social workers like I am. And the only common thread was I was on the caseload of other social workers when I was younger, with my mom being addicted to drugs, growing up in poverty in Brooklyn, New York. A lot of the brothers in my family, incarceration was like a job track, unfortunately. And so we're breaking the cycles. My son, he's just turned 18 in December. I'm really, really proud of him. He's in a boarding school in Oregon and he's doing really, really well. But so as far as the calling, the common thread, I now say that social workers are born, not made, but I will tell you what I wanted to be when I was young. Was like salt and pepper, a hit
Oh,
radio.
yeah.
And I'm dating myself because the Word Up magazine, like Biggie Smalls says and all of that stuff was real for me. So that's what I aspired to. I just so happened years later moved to Washington, D.C. with my dad. And like I said, got pregnant and all of that. But I went to take a parenting class. I've always been a lifetime learner. So that's another common thread for me. Even when my mom was getting high, she was reading books. I just used to buy her books for the holidays. She'd be good. And I'm an avid reader too. I got that from my mama. Beautiful, bless her soul. But I went to take this parenting class, dragging my son's father with me. I was 7 months pregnant. And at the end of the class, we had to do a presentation. And I was actually in a class with court mandated parents. See, I am volunteering and they were court mandated.
Wow.
And we had such a good time. And I remember at that time it was a VHS cassette. So I put that in a TV. And I noticed that the parent educator, she had invited her supervisor. We're doing our presentations. And I did something on Black children are geniuses and did my whole presentation. At the end, she pulls me to the side and said, have you ever thought about being a social worker? And like so many people, and probably some of your listeners, I thought social workers did two things. One, work in a welfare building, which I had never had a good experience, a positive one, in my own personal experience. And then two, I thought they took children away. So of course I wouldn't want to do that, not knowing that you could do so much more. And she was actually pursuing her master's at Bowie. I went to Howard, I got to put that plug in.
Yeah, you did.
She was getting her master's in Bowie. Don't you know, I got that job. I became the parent educator. 7 months pregnant, became the parent educator, went back to Catholic University for my undergrad and I finally knew what I wanted to do because I was a late bloomer. I didn't know what I wanted to do. My dad said do IT. That's where the money was. And he was so right, but that wasn't my calling. And so that's how I fell into it. It was totally by accident. Someone else saw it in me. So it's important. I talked earlier about giving back. It's important to know that people are watching you. It's important that we recognize and appreciate others for their talents and gifts and stop trying to make everybody the same. They got to act like me. They got to think like me. They got to talk like me. No, God made us diverse, And so the common thread is learning.
Learning.
And then I would say social work, but I was on the other side of the coin. And I totally love it. Having my own practice, the entrepreneurship. I did have a number of entrepreneurs in the family. One of my aunties, she would go up and down the streets of Bronx and Brooklyn, selling all kinds of different merchandise. And so I learned a lot from them. Yeah.
And you are a mentor, but who were your mentors as you went up? Who could you pay homage to?
Oh man, well, one is Dr. Brenda McGatney Douglas from Michigan. She was a professor, and I met her actually in Ghana, my first study abroad while I was at Catholic University. And yeah, she became my mentor, African-American woman. She was in a interracial relationship and she had a son, and it just blew my mind. He is like 10, 16. Well, he was 10. He's been traveling since he was 10. And I'm like, what is he doing here? And, so I created those experiences for my children as well, going abroad, but I learned that stuff from her. So she's one. And then more modern day, like currently I'm being mentored by the one and only Les Brown.
Yes.
And that's been just amazing. I do think it's so important that we connect with people who are doing the things we want to do, ladies and gentlemen. So if you want to be here, you got to find a circle. It's not, it's so heartbreaking and disappointing to a lot of my clients. And I went through this myself personally, when our family and our friends aren't like rah, when we have this wonderful, crazy business idea, or we want to start something new or break a cycle. They look at us like, what?
Yes, they
So
do.
your mentors, though, would be the ones encouraging you, showing you the way. No need to reinvent the wheel all the time. And so for that reason, yes, one of my ways to give back is I mentor students, social work students. I love education. It's a big value in my household. And so I have them do internships with me. And I have been responsible to support many students, young people. Our young adults need, ladies and gentlemen, some guidance. And they don't always want to listen to their parents. I could say the same thing as their parents, but they will hear it from me because I'm not the parent. Yeah, I know how that goes. And I just love it. I just love to see all what they do with their careers and things like that.
What's next for you?
So one of the things that I have, two things that are like really cooking and sizzling. I'm excited, it's smelling good. I can smell the aroma in the air already.
It's
One is
delicious.
the 5-day Live Happy Challenge that's free. And I'd like to share that link with you so you can share with your audience, where we're going to take a holistic perspective on how in the world, what are the secrets, what are the hacks to living happy? And so we're going to kick that off on February the 7th, and it's for 5 days. The second thing is I'm actually working on a book anthology, Dr. Penn.
Oh,
This actually would be a great addition to that. Where I'm
yes,
going to have
Sally.
people from different professionals talking about mental health. So it's
Oh, I
actually
would love
like
that.
you can see. Yes. So that's another thing I'm working on, and we should publish that in April. And yeah, it's a really exciting project.
That's good. That's so wonderful. I think you are right about young adults need mentoring. I think I grew up in a church, and I grew up as a young adult in church, and there were so many single parent mothers who, when their kids got 16, they put their kids on autopilot and then wonder why they went awry in their their young adult years. And I just remember my son trying to be so independent. I was like, listen, you can't do this by yourself. Nobody can. It's a lie. It's a lie that you could do it by yourself. You're talking about finding circles of people who
Yes.
want to elevate you in the things you want to be
Yes.
elevated in. And
Yes.
it takes that, right? It takes a village,
Yes. Oh, I love that proverb. It's so real. It
That's
does.
it's so real. I'm so glad that you joined us today. I'm so happy to see you. Happy New Year. And
Thank you. Happy New Year to you. It's going to be a great new year. We're going to impact a lot of lives together.
yes.
So,
So
yes.
listen, people, go out and get this book. Find out what's going on with your purse, And I will leave the information about her book. We will leave the information about her 5-day Being Happy challenge.
Yes.
And if you recognizing some signs about mental instability, check yourself.
Yeah.
As they
Take a look
say,
in the
or
mirror,
wreck
as
yourself.
Michael Jackson said. Yes. And the site for the 5-day Live Happy Challenge is actually 5daylivehhappychallenge.com.
Wonderful.
So
We're going to put that in the show notes for you to be able to see that in writing. And once again, thank you so much for being our guest here on A Well-Lived Life. You are such a beautiful inspiration, just light beaming from you. And I'm very thankful that you came on.
Bless you. Thank you.